This is the most dangerous city located in the most dangerous region of the most dangerous country on the planet. For at least 2 years, Colima has had the highest murder rate in the world. Every imaginable act of depravity, brutality, and violence takes place right here on the Mexican streets of Colima. But what exactly makes Colima the murder capital of the world, and why, despite all the efforts of the Mexican government, does the situation only seem to worsen? This isn't merely a hotspot for cartel activity. It is arguably the single most hostile place on Earth. Colima is both a state in Mexico and the capital city of that state. It's located on the west coast, almost directly west of Mexico City. It's one of the smallest states in all of Mexico, with the lowest population of any state, and yet today it has earned a notorious reputation for levels of violence unseen not only elsewhere in Mexico, but anywhere in the world. Every few years, charts are published, ranking the deadliest cities in the world by murder rate per 100,000 people. Unsurprisingly, Mexican cities invariably feature a stark symptom of the nation's enormous cartel problem. For several years now, Colima has consistently been near the top, and in very recent years, it's claimed that top spot. In 2024, Colima posted a staggering murder rate of 140.32 per 100,000 people. The next closest city, Ciudad Obregón, sits at 117.83, and the 10th ranked Mexican city of Juarez records almost half of Colima's rate at 77.43. Juarez, half. Colima doesn't merely top the dangerous city ranking, it utterly outclasses its competition and leaves them far behind. Even Mexico's Citizen Council for Public Safety and Criminal Justice, when publishing its 2022 ranking of the world's 50th most violent cities, it placed Colima at the top with a staggering rate of 181.94 homicides per 100,000 residents. The report further states that Colima's murder rate is comparable to the rate in Medellin, Colombia, during the late 1980s and early 1990s. That's at the height of Pablo Escobar's power, when he and Cartel waged a campaign against the state to prevent his extradition to the United States. So, when we talk about how dangerous Colima is, we are not referring only to current threats, but to a long-standing legacy of extreme violence, earning it a reputation as one of the most dangerous places of all time, even outside the context of an active war. And Colima has it all. Not just murders, it's got fraud, robberies, domestic violence, threats, property damage, drug dealing, burglary, car theft, assaults, money laundering, extortion, arms trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, kidnap, ransom incidents. So take a deep breath, Simon. And I could go on all day. If it's a crime, that shit is happening in Colima. And yet, this is supposed to be just a place like any other. Colima, both the state and the city, was not always this way. Every Mexican region has had its share of organized violent crime. But in 2006, Colima's murder rate wasn't 180 per 100,000 people. It wasn't 140 or even 100. It was 5. 5 murders per 100,000 people. Colima State is a powerhouse of fruit and crop production, a remarkably diverse landscape boasting reserves that shelter thousands of plant species, a third of all of Mexico's bird species, and a full quarter of its mammal species. It's also a center of industry. Palms are grown for their fibers to make a wide variety of items, earning it the nickname of the City of Palms. With stunning volcanoes, including the most active in all of Mexico, beautiful beaches, majestic mountains, and a rich tapestry of art, culture, and people, Colima offers a uniquely captivating experience. And yet, today, it is defined by criminality, by violence, by murder. In this place, the only thing more explosive than the volcano on the horizon is the unrest that erupts on its streets. And that begs the question, what the f*** happened? To set the scene, we need to go back and explore a bit of Colima's history. We want to show how the region has long existed alongside violence, laying the foundations for its explosive state in the 21st century. Okay, so quick crash course on Colima. The area has been inhabited for centuries. Between 2000 BC and 1000 AD, the Otomi, Nahuatl, Tolteca, Chichimeca, and Tarasca cultures flourished there. Later, the region was mainly populated by a group known as the Purepecha from around 1100 to 1530, along with closely related Colima Indians. Unfortunately, these two tribes ended up fighting a war against each other at the worst possible time. Because, well, then came the Spanish, and I'm sure nobody was expecting them. At the time, much of West Mexico was under the political control of the Kingdom of Tzintzuntzan, the second largest and most powerful Mesoamerican empire. Its influence stretched from the state of Mexico into Guanajuato, around the shores of Lake Chalapa, and through parts of Colima to the Pacific coast. However, this system allowed a degree of regional autonomy. King Colima, the leader of the Colima Indians and the first reference for the region's eventual name, effectively governed Colima after defeating the Purapeca and forcing them to go south. Colima quickly saw the writing on the wall with the arrival of the conquistadors and resisted their initial incursion. While indigenous forces managed to win several smaller skirmishes, they lost a decisive battle in 1523. In its aftermath, a Spanish settlement was established known as San Sebastián de Colima in what is now the city of Colima. The Spanish then built roads and infrastructure linking Colima to the already established Mexico City. This route quickly made Colima a vital center for trading goods and channeling silver back to the Spanish crown. The nearby port of Manzanillo proved especially useful for shipping these goods by sea on Spanish galleons. Although they couldn't have known it at the time, half a millennium later, Manzanillo remains a crucial port for Mexico, and Colima continues to be integral in transporting various goods across the country, and we will definitely be getting to that later. Mexican independence was won from the Spanish in 1810 after 3 centuries of New World exploitation. The region of Colima was later designated as a Mexican state in 1857, and it is from this point onward that we must distinguish between the state and the city versions of Colima. By 1910, the Mexican Revolution commenced, ushering in a period of political instability for Colima. Various factions loyal to both revolutionary and anti-revolutionary leaders operated throughout the state, vying for control of key trade routes. By the 1920s, the conflict had subsided as the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or PRI, ascended to power, dominating Mexico's political landscape for much of the 20th century. During this era, Colima experienced significant growth. As the world became more interconnected, the port of Manzanillo emerged as Mexico's largest on the Pacific coast, providing a vital gateway for goods from around the globe. At the same time, drug cartels began to establish themselves, trafficking narcotics from South America to the USA, with Mexico and Colima in particular serving as a strategic stop along the route. It almost seems as if the stage was set centuries ago when the conquistadors first arrived on Mexican shores for Colima to become the dangerous place that it is today. Yet much of its history mirrors that of the rest of Mexico. So, what makes Colima stand out as a particularly hostile region now, even earning the reputation of having the highest murder rate in the world? In the grand scheme of things, Colima, the state and the city, is not much different from many other places in Mexico. Yet this reality raises a critical question. Why does Colima have the highest murder rate in the world, far surpassing even those regions in Mexico already known for their danger? While Mexico often sees more than 5 cities ranked among the highest in homicide rates at any given time, suggesting that violence is a national issue, Colima remains an outlier. There must be a reason why Colima stands apart. And, indeed, there is. The situation is the result of a complicated mix of factors, from geography and historical gang policies to the behavior of individuals within the city and the state, not to mention the impact of US drug policies. So let's break it all down. If you want as brief an answer as possible as to why Colima is dangerous, it's because of gangs and drugs. A basic supply and demand issue combined with Colima's unique geography creates a perilous living environment. Colima is located near the western coast, adjacent to the port city of Manzanillo, which, as previously mentioned, is Mexico's largest port on its Pacific side. It is impossible to discuss the dangers of Colima without also mentioning Manzanillo. The two are simply inseparable, like a pair of violently conjoined twins. In fact, Manzanillo alone ranks 5th in the world for murder rates, a highly perilous statistic on its own. And why is that? Well, essentially, it's due to the influx of drugs that flow through its port. It's always drugs. Some drugs are important, but even more critical are the chemical ingredients used to produce drugs like fentanyl, the opioid currently plaguing US streets. Fentanyl's 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine, making it very easy for opioid users to overdose on, especially when it's used to cut other drugs like heroin. In someone without a high tolerance, just 2 milligrams can be lethal. The ingredients for fentanyl enter Manzanillo from countries such as China and India before being synthesized into the drug in Mexico and sent to the border, where they're sold to generate profits for the cartels. This is a highly lucrative operation. The drugs can be manufactured in large batches and sold at a significant markup. For example, in Philadelphia, one of the most openly brazen drug markets, a gram of fentanyl can fetch around $25 on the street. Prices vary across the nation. In San Francisco, it's cheaper, while in New York City, it's more expensive. But the cartels profit at every point along the supply chain. Moreover, an addict needs to use the drug roughly every 3 hours to stave off withdrawal, meaning that the financial burden quickly escalates given how widespread the problem is. And while some of the largest police seizures of substances like cocaine have taken place in Manzanillo, the police and armed forces just can't seem to control the flow of narcotics and their ingredients, a fact clearly reflected in the ongoing opioid crisis in the US. Manzanillo, as Mexico's largest Pacific side port, is the linchpin in it all. Not only do drugs and their ingredients enter through Manzanillo from around the world, but controlling this port also offers access to the entire global market, where prices can vary wildly from country to country. Take meth as an example. A gram in the US can cost as little as $20 at the low end, while on the streets of Australia, that same amount can be almost 10 times higher. Thus, control over Manzanillo doesn't just grant cartels access to the US market, it opens the door to global markets involving sums that reach into the dozens of billions of dollars. This is more money than the average cartel member could ever hope to earn, even over the course of 1 million lifetimes. So given all of that, you might expect the cartels to seize and hold Manzanillo at all costs, or for those who don't yet control it, to fight relentlessly for its capture. Manzanillo is where shipments first touch Mexican shores, though Colima controls access to this vital port city. In effect, if you control Colima and its surrounding region, you control the entire supply chain. While it's common for Mexican cartels to battle over territory, the enormous financial incentives tied to Colima and Manzanillo only intensify these conflicts. This fierce struggle fuels on-the-ground brutality, with everyday citizens often being caught in the crossfire. At present, it's not just 2 cartels waging war in Colima to seize control of the drug trade. It's 3, which intensifies the chaos. First of all, there's the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo's longtime associates. Then there's the Jalisco New Generation cartel, or CJNG, notorious for its extreme violence and coordinated operations using tools like drones. And finally, there's Los Zetas, infamous worldwide for their brutality, torture, assassinations, extortions, kidnappings, and beheadings, along with every unspeakable atrocity that you could possibly imagine. Currently, the CJNG control Colima and Manzanillo, reaping the benefits of a steady flow of narcotics and cash. However, Manzanillo and Colima are not new hotspots. These supply chains have long existed, driven by massive financial incentives. The cartels didn't just suddenly discover the importance of a global drug supply network. So, what explains the recent surge in Colima's murder rate? Well, fentanyl is a relatively new phenomenon, and with production levels more than doubling since 2016, there's more money to be made than ever. This surge in profits has undoubtedly contributed to the violence. Similarly, the Sinaloa cartel once controlled large parts of Colima. However, after El Chapo became a permanent guest of Uncle Sam in the late 2010s, a turf war erupted for control, a contest that, at present, the CJNG is winning. But that ain't all. We also need to understand how the Mexican state's policies have escalated conditions for the cartels to thrive, further fueling the cycle of brutality in Colima. And to do that, we got to travel back to 2006. Mexico, it's long struggled with drug and cartel problems. Naturally, numerous strategies have been attempted to solve these issues once and for all. In 2016, President Felipe Calderon declared war on the cartels, assembling a coalition of countries and deploying the military in an unprecedented show of force to tackle the cartel problem. Drug lords were detained, and on the surface, it appeared to be a successful measure, but it did nothing to lower the murder rate. This policy remained in effect until 2018, when Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected and introduced a controversial strategy for peace that included granting amnesty to drug traffickers and producers. The aim was to prevent lower-income individuals, such as farmers, from turning to the drug trade. Furthermore, the administration even began turning a blind eye to cartel activity to reduce violence, effectively abandoning some areas to the point where the cartels themselves started setting up social services and taking control. In 2019, Obrador declared the war over, with the same confidence George W. Bush had when he proclaimed mission accomplished in Iraq. Yet, the murder rate remains unchanged. By 2022, Obrador's final year in office, defense spending had skyrocketed, and despite his calls for the military to return to the barracks, more armed soldiers than ever were patrolling the streets under a so-called non-aggression pact. It just didn't work. Now, in 2024, under President Claudia Sheinbaum, the notion that the war was ever truly over has been discarded, paving the way for a new strategy. The core issue was a lack of appreciation for how the policies of multiple administrations would interlock and influence the cartels. On the surface, a fully militarized response from the Mexican armed forces and support from other nations might seem like an effective approach to tackling an endemic and enormous cartel problem. Cut the head off a snake and the body will die. After all, the majority of the cartel leaders targeted by the Mexican government in 2006 have since been incarcerated. But this wasn't a snake, it was a hydra. With every head you cut off, 3 more just sprang up to take its place. Once the organization was fragmented, new groups emerged from the remnants to seize control, because the underlying issue, poverty, which pushed everyday people towards a life of crime, had not been addressed. In fact, the breakup of the cartels into smaller factions competing for local power weakens local governments. And nationwide, the murder rate actually increased. You remember that in 2006, when the war began, Colima's murder rate was just 5 per 100,000 people? Well, at first glance, hugs not bullets, aimed at addressing the root issues behind the rise of the cartels, does appear to be a clever thing to do, one that pulls the weed out by the roots. How the Mexican government had already spent over a decade battling the cartels, which had become battle-hardened, organized, fragmented, and fiercely protective of their local territories. So when the government lifted the pressure off the cartels, what did it expect to happen? This policy shift effectively handed de facto control of these areas to entrenched criminal elements while completely failing to meaningfully reduce illicit activity. Both of these strategies might have worked if used in isolation. It's well known that long-term outreach programs help reduce the conditions that push people toward gangs. Just look at a place like El Salvador. After President Bukele was elected, the country cracked down quickly on gangs with a militaristic approach, and the murder rate plummeted. However, when these tactics were combined in the order they were implemented, the result was a brutal escalation. First, the war pushed the cartels into even greater violence, and then they were simply left to operate freely. This has proven to be a fatal mistake for the people across Mexico. But why am I telling you this? What does it have to do with Colima? Well, Colima stands at the heart of the problem. The drugs provide the wealth that drives people to adopt a gang lifestyle as a means of escaping poverty. These issues have come home to roost in Colima, where violence and murder rates have surged to become the highest in the world. The situation epitomizes the failures of the Mexican government, which has been unable to address a host of challenges. In Colima, a cadre of fragmented next-generation cartels has emerged, more organized, more brutal, and more capable than ever before, fiercely vying for control over a territory that promises unparalleled profitability. Meanwhile, the local population remains marred in poverty, with limited opportunities to improve their circumstances. In Colima, the brutal, fragmenting campaign, coupled with subsequent standoffs, has, as expected, escalated violence. The state has witnessed a series of high-profile assassinations. At least a dozen public figures have been targeted. On the 16th of June 2020, hitmen killed federal judge Uriel Villegas Ortiz and his wife Veronica Barajas in the state capital, each shot more than 20 times. Colima was also one of the 5 states contributing to over 50% of the clandestine mass graves exhumed during Obrador's presidency. Its murder rate in 2015 was just a third of what it had become by 2020, and it consistently topped Mexico's murder rankings since 2016. Clearly, Mexico's policies have failed Colima. And the police, they're not making a meaningful impact. In many areas, Mexican police are simply outnumbered and often outgunned by cartel members. Some officers are bribed to look the other way, while those who do resist corruption remain underpaid and fearful of the cartel's vast power and resources. How else Can we explain the disappearance of key figures such as federal judges tasked with prosecuting cartel members who vanish in broad daylight only to be found a month later in a shallow grave in the countryside? This very circumstance is why the military is frequently called in to fulfill the police's role. Clearly, the situation is messy and deeply embedded with no simple answer in sight. So what can be done? How can Colima reclaim its status as the beautiful and relatively peaceful place that it once was? Under a new president, Mexico is trying once again, except this time, there may be a reason to believe that things are going to be different. The reason is that the US and Mexico are now discussing this problem more openly. Scheinbaum is engaging directly with President Trump over the cartels, and while they often push back and threaten each other with tariffs and additional measures, both sides share a common goal. Trump wants to stop the flow of fentanyl across the border, while Scheinbaum aims to strip the cartels of their power. Removing the cartel's influence will support Trump's objective, and with any luck, the recent deployment of Mexican troops to the US border will encourage the United States to assist with Mexico's problem. Despite media expectations of another round of hugs, not bullets diplomacy, Scheinbaum has overseen the most significant military deployment in over 6 years. Is this a new strategy or simply Calderon's old policy repackaged for 2025? We're just going to have to wait and see. But we have to remember that this whole mess isn't just Mexico and the US's problem, it's a global issue. The ingredients come from China and India. Drugs like cocaine originate from Colombia and other areas of South America, and Europe too faces a significant drug supply problem. The only way to quell Mexico's massive cartel situation is through a coordinated international effort with Colima and the port at Manzanillo at its heart. Much more needs to be done to ensure that drug ingredients do not arrive on Mexico's shores. If the Mexican government can reclaim control over what enters through Manzanillo, it will go a long way toward eliminating the cartels. But that means a lot of things. It means taking on the cartels directly, confronting not only them but also China, India, and any other nation that's adding fuel to the fire. It calls for a coordinated international strategy throughout South America to stop drugs from reaching Mexico in the first place, as well as curbing the flow of weapons that the cartels acquire from the US side of the border. It requires local outreach, addressing poverty among young people in Mexico and ensuring that citizens don't feel forced into crime as the only way to build a better life. And that's a lot easier said than done, but it's not impossible. Perhaps some radical new ideas, or even old ideas, presented in bold, innovative ways, could one day free Colima from the clutches of the cartels once and for all. One thing, though, is for sure. If there comes a day when Colima is no longer at the top of that list, it will mean something has been done right. Until then, however, this Mexican standoff will only worsen. In the end, the only winners in this game are the sicarios. Thank you for watching.